Hello and welcome to this episode of the Cegeka Webinar. Thank you for joining us. I am Mihai Popa. I will be your host today. Our goal is to look into the new technology landscape, which keeps on mushrooming these days, and at how companies with major previous investments in software are going about bringing these technologies into their stack or not. Whether we may talk about low-code, cross-platform mobile development, game-changing artificial intelligence, or simply evolving from legacy code to newer and faster development platforms, all organizations need to make technology decisions. And today we'd like to understand how these decisions are made and what the implications are for both companies in the product area and in the service area. And today I think we'll be able to talk to people involved in both the ends of the spectrum. Now, in the right part of your screen, you will see the question and answers window. And there you can write your questions, and we will address them throughout the webinar and at the end of it, trying to make this session as interactive as possible. To meet our speakers today, first of all, Nicholas Gubert of Native Instruments is not able to join us today, unfortunately. And although he will be missed, he promised to join us on our next talk. Now, to meet our speakers, first of all, thank you for being here. And I suggest we have a table round and let our speakers introduce themselves. Gentlemen.
Okay, I will start. My name is Robert. I'm Mircea. I'm working as head of digital platforms in Orange, Romania. We are one of the departments in IT in Orange. Actually, we are the ones which provide the software for our end customers. What we published currently on a public website, mobile apps, all the necessary integrations with our backend systems and necessary integration with telecom platforms. I'm here because I find this very challenging, and we are also in the position where we make these technology choices fairly often because of the dynamicity of the industry and our competition in the Romanian market.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Robert.
Hello, my name is Radu Apostoae. I'm a director of software engineering for GoPro and also the leader of the GoPro Bucharest office.
Okay.
And I'm Andrei Pavel, and I'm working for Cegeka Romania, which is a service company. And I think there are some different way of approaching between a product and a service company. But I think there are also a lot of things that are common. So I'm also here to share a little bit my view or our view, but also learn both from Mircea and Radu. So very interesting to. I'm very interested to get this going.
Okay. Now to start off, I think that the sources that all of us learn about new technologies are quite important. So where do you hear about new technologies, and how can you tell if an emerging technology can actually bring a benefit, whether it is by you reading or getting informed from various blogs, articles, or whether it is because a competitor has recently started an initiative in the area. How do you learn about it, and how do you discern about what's relevant and what not? Anyone want to pick
Where do we
up?
start? I can pick it up. For GoPro, it's a rather easy question to answer because GoPro has innovation baked within our company culture. For us, it's important to always come out with the best product for our customers. So we're always interested in the technologies that would allow this to happen. So we're taking information from any source possible, and all our employees are welcome to suggest ideas for improvement. We actually have quite a number of programs to suggest improvements and to actually bring them to life. We're actively looking even for POCs and for results, and when deciding what to choose, we're going to take all those results into account. So it's either web information posts, conferences that all our employees attend, also what the market does, but also what the market needs. So we're always paying attention to what would bring benefits to our customers. We know pretty well what the desires of our customers are, and we're actively working on addressing those problems and bringing those opportunities to life. So that's where we're focused in looking for tech that addresses those items. So it's both internal, external. Any sources of information are welcome for us.
But you could not say, thank you, Radu, but you could not say that, every single technology that pops up is also going to bring value to your table. So the process of evaluation is probably as important.
That is for sure. There is obviously a process to evaluate, but then again, if you want to innovate, you can't put a lid on ideas. It's important to let all the ideas surface and look at all the potential opportunities, and then have a process to actually select what makes more sense. But otherwise, everybody's welcome to come up with ideas.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
For my case, actually Orange case, things are pretty much the same, but we also have a particular landscape here due to the fact that we are also a service company which is using also the technology delivered by our partners. And although the IT in Orange is purely development, is not something that we look into buying platforms, there are occasionally cases where our partners came with some innovative technology to propose to us in order to adopt it or to in their products and so on. But coming from most of the inspiration in our case is pretty much the same. We are not looking actively necessary in selecting a technology just out of the blue. We put all the decisions in the context of the business requirement that we need to address. Actually, whatever fits the bill, let's say, for accomplishing that. As sources, the technology stacks, we are following very closely the technology radars. Maybe you are familiar, for example, with the ThoughtWorks technology radar, which is published by the consulting company ThoughtWorks almost twice a year. This is a great source of inspiration because it allows us to actually assess the technology based on the maturity. And generally, we are looking for trends here. Although we are not in the, let's say, the innovators so often, we are usually in the early adopters phase, where we take the technology, play with it. We go to conferences, mostly the ones which are industry, let's say, setters. For example, one of the best, in my opinion, is QCon, which is held in London. And we are going there for quite some times, maybe 15 years or so. And is a great source of inspiration usually. There are others as well, but people come to us saying that they try to learn new stuff from articles on Twitter, webinars like this. We saw a lot during this pandemic situation that most of them moved to online. And after developers trying some new things, they like I don't know, a new cool front end, a new cool language for backend, and so on. And based on this, usually we have a pattern here where we try to extract what something that we can use for a longer period of time and not necessary for only POC.
Yeah, roger that. Thanks a lot. And also, I think many companies would only embrace a new technology once it's been validated by Gartner and so on. That happens
Gartner
especially with the big guys.
is a source of inspiration, but it's not necessarily the usually we go to Gartner when we are looking for platforms, because we are not building everything. Of course, I assume that you are not building the accounting software in your company, you are just buying it.
Really.
So we are in the same position in the telecom. We take some big platforms and we integrate it with our software built in house. And Gartner for sure is a inspiration for a short list of partners that are potential to be selected.
Thank you. Andre, would you continue?
Yeah, so I think for a service company, there is the situation where you have, customer requests that also request the technology stack. And that makes sense, of course, because it should be aligned to the product strategy, to the company strategy, and to be coherent in your technology choices makes a lot of sense. And one of the inputs is from that. So I don't know thy customer should be a golden rule, also from a technology perspective. Other than that, of course, there's the scenario where there's a certain flexibility in choosing the technology stack. And then, okay, there's the question, what do you propose to a certain customer that, I don't know, is not keen on selecting a certain stack or not? And as Mircea mentioned, I think, Robert, sorry, mentioned, I think there are a lot of resources and sources on the web, starting from, ThoughtWorks, but even maybe looking on surveys like the ones that was, for example, released by Stack Overflow for 2020 last month. There are always interesting things and makes the context more complete. Competition is always an inspiring source, of course, but also what is important is if you have, and I think that's a purpose in itself, dedicated and passionate colleagues, then that's a very valuable resource. And as a company, I think you need to sponsor that and encourage that. Any colleague can come with a proposal. Of course, that doesn't mean that every proposal will be part of your offering, but still having this culture of proactive proposal, even from a technology perspective, from developers, I think it's a very valuable resource. And there are different ways to, I don't know, encourage that on a company. We use, for example, guilds, the .NET Guild or the Java Guild or the People Management Guild, whatever. And then there's a good, I think, occasion for the colleagues to discuss about that. And if something interesting pops up as a framework or I don't know, new version of a framework, or it's always worth considering, definitely. And of course, I think that the small things like Twitter, I think also Robert mentioned, there are a lot of guru guys, excellent guys. They're like Bob Martin or Martin Fowler or Scott Hanselman or Jeff Atwood, etc., that always are keeping in touch with what happens. And as in fashion, also, they are also trendsetters, of course, in a different way. But it's very interesting to see and to watch those guys and learn from them and then apply to your own scenario situation.
At least as a proof of concept, if not more.
Yes, of course.
Okay, so let's say that we have decided on a new technology to bring in-house, and we're convinced of its benefits, of its potential benefits. What do? Do you train your in-house people? Do you bring talent from the market which already have a little bit of experience, or both?
I would start again because I just realized I didn't give any insight into how we choose the actual technologies. I thought we were only talking about the sources. So Once we do have a lot of information about potential ideas, we definitely need to take into account the most important thing, which is the whole product life cycle, because we're working on a product and our product will be on the market for several years. So we need to take into account the fact that this technology will need to support the entire life cycle of the product. Once we launch a product, it's not a tech stack that we can change anymore or affect anyway. So it needs to be something that's mature enough to support the entire life cycle. So there is definitely a lot of criteria we take. Sorry?
Future-proof, as it were.
Future-proof indeed, and stable enough and mature enough. So there's definitely a lot of criteria we take into account when selecting new tech, but this is the most important to look into. Coming back to your question, we do POCs for any new ideas because we do need to understand how well they would fit our existing environment and our existing portfolio of technologies we use. And once we get the results, we push forward with an implementation project or with another deep dive. It depends on the scale of the change. There are small changes which we probably apply monthly or frequently anyway, and where the decision to actually move forward with the implementation lies within the implementation team because it's a small change. If we're talking about bigger frameworks or tech stacks, and it's a longer process, and we do need to take into account our product lifecycle as well, and how often we release new products.
Sorry, in the case of a small POC, already existing people would do self-training, self-study, and just try their hands at the respective technology.
Usually, yeah. In most cases, the ideas come from the engineering team. So it's a technology they've been investigating, they've been looking into, and they're eager to work with. And if it proves that it's something that would actually bring a lot of value, then we just take the decision and go ahead and implement it. So usually, yes, it's our engineering teams who train on new technologies and start implementing them. But then if we're talking about a large scale change where it makes a lot of sense to hire people who already have the know-how, we can also take that decision to hire people to jumpstart a new technology. But that's not something that happens very often. You need to jump into something completely wildly different from whatever you have in-house.
In our case, things are somehow the same. The idea here that is maybe compared to a product company, we are more diverse in the type of systems that we have here. Because in our case, we have different technology stacks supporting different business functions and so on. And usually when we decide on a new stack, we don't go to market necessarily from the beginning. We are trying to, as a rule of thumb, let's say, we are trying to give the engineers the time and to try out the new technology, to actually do some small experiments or maybe throw away projects that they want to do. Afterwards, if we decide that if it's something that we'd like to follow up more, we go to train them. We have different resources here, maybe online, maybe classroom in previous times, not now, but usually this type of training. And at some point, if the domain that we are trying to get into is really new, novel for us, we go first and find in the market several key people, let's say, that we are have the purpose or are already familiar with the technology that we try or the stack that we want, and they will actually have the purpose of sparking and igniting the fire of that technology in a certain area. And as an example, a concrete example that happened last year was the adoption of RPA, robotic process automation frameworks. This was the approach that we took, and at the end we have now developers who certified into this by themselves, but everything started like a plug in a certain area and then expanded to cross-functional teams and so on, depending on the case. Also, the people that usually go and start this kind of, let's say, fire, they have the role of growing the others. We do a lot of internal presentations around technology. We are trying to foster a culture of sharing here, and this is a good way to actually make others aware about the new technology and the fact that they can use it in some purpose. And this is the way that we usually go and adopt something.
Okay, right. Well, a little bit related to what you were just saying, Robert. And everybody, have you ever experienced resistance to change on the part of your teams who sometimes maybe like to be in their comfort zone?
Front-facing, like, okay, I don't want to use this, is not very often. We have also some kind of debates here around technology because people, for example, comparing frameworks and so on, maybe, I don't know, Oracle provided versus community and so on. Something like this usually takes place. And there are people who do not actually adopt it from the start, and there are different cycles of adopting this, and I interpret this based on either the right moment when should happen, because maybe it's not the right moment for that team or that developer to jump into this, but usually the majority opinion wins, and the others are I don't know, let's say convinced of on the way. We are afraid usually when we don't understand or when we are not comfortable with a new technology. And a large portion of my time and some other technical leads is directed into discussions and clarifications and answering questions and showing what we can do with that technology. This is about giving assurance that failing is safe, and usually this helps in actually adopting something new.
For GoPro, resistance to changes. Oh, sorry, Andre.
Please.
Resistance to change is not such a big problem, actually, because people are involved in the decision-making process. So engineering is always part of the decision in terms of new technologies and frameworks. And therefore, it's our decision, and it's a lot easier to adopt it. Obviously, a lot of people are uncomfortable with change, but when you are part of the decision and you understand where you contribute to making the best decision, then it's a lot easier to emotionally accept the change.
Resistance is futile.
No, resistance is usual. It's useful actually, because it has some information in it which you need to take into account.
Understood.
So maybe, Mihai, just to link a little bit the two questions also regarding the do we hire or do we train? I think, of course, the obvious answer is both. It really depends on situation, as my colleagues also mentioned before. It really depends. Is it small? Is it big? What are the context related to it? What are the I don't know, the time frames to deliver on it. Probably if it's very close, then you don't have really the time to train at least a level to be able to deliver a high quality. And it also depends on what we understand by new. Is it new for us as a company, but it has been on the market for some time, or is it just new? If it's just new, then probably you can't really hire people with a high degree of expertise, because but I think it's it's both, and it really depends on the situation, and having the flexibility to consider both, it's always good. Looking to the other question, as are there cons and pros, because then it relates a little bit to the first question. If you need to train on something, do you have also resistance on that? And of course, there's always a resistance, as long as it is a constructive resistance, as Radu mentioned, because there are some good reasoning. So you don't want a yes type man type of a team, but just bring up all the pros and cons. But it's good to understand that, as with most things, there's the Gauss distribution, where you have, of course, the innovators, the early adopters, the majority, and then the last part with the laggers. But for a good adoption, I think also, as Radu mentioned, you need to involve the teams, the engineers. After that, of course, you need to communicate very well. You need to identify some champions that will promote that in the teams, start a training session, and of course then extend it to all teams, also by doing internal marketing, if you will. But resistance is in our nature, and a good way to approach it is to try to make it constructive, involve the people that will execute on it, and then for the right reasons and for the good reasons, try to expand it to the entire teams or entire population.
Okay, thank you so much. We have a question from Cliff. He asks us, to what degree did the participants take technology innovations from domains other than their own?
To the degree to which they're relevant to the products we're trying to develop. We're not strictly focused on what we've done before, but obviously we're open to other ideas as well. They could come from different domains, indeed, but it's important that they apply to what we're trying to build. I'm trying to think of an example, but I don't think something comes to mind right now. But we're not focused on a single domain.
Mm-hmm. So it may be that you may hire someone coming from a completely different vertical, which has to do with software development. And then they would bring a certain methodology or certain way of looking at things or technology stack and suggest it to you. And it would be something that you were not previously thinking of or taking into consideration.
That would definitely be a good opportunity.
Yeah, that's a very good question, Cliff. Thank you. I think for a service company, it's in our nature to try to use different technologies or different processes across projects. But still, I think it's important to look at it from what perspective do we see innovation? Is it from, let's say, from a product perspective? Is it also from a technical perspective? Optimal is both, of course. But from a technical perspective, it's definitely something that I think can be applied in different verticals. But also from a functional perspective, I think can be applied to verticals. We had a quite recent example of doing a online onboarding journey that was quite applicable also for in a mobile application, fintech related. Think Revolut, how you do it with a selfie and the identity card. That was also applicable in an insurance vertical, but also in a quite related, of course, but in a fintech Revolut type of application. So there we also proposed to the customer some of the, let's say, innovations that we did across projects. And it's always interesting and rewarding to see that you can get better products by cross innovation, if I may say, or applying innovations in different projects. From a technical perspective, though, I think it's a little bit easier to do that. You can use some sort of techniques in different projects where the vertical doesn't necessarily has a very strong.
I can also give actually two examples of cases where we borrowed, let's say, ideas, not necessarily the full package from other domain there rather than telecom or software development. for example, we become several years ago, we entered the fintech market with Orange Money, and we at that moment we didn't know anything about financial services and so on. We have no idea what they meant and so on. That was a classical example of jump starting with several experts in that area. But once we got those experts, we found out valuable information on how they build systems and so on, what technologies they use and so on. And we actually took this and of course, we did not copy it. We had already some things in the telecom area, but we built over the ideas that we found out and we took from the banking industry, for example, in our case. And the other part related to borrowing ideas from other domains is not necessarily technology related, is more like culture related, so, or in the organizational development area. We are doing here some kind of cross inspiration from psychology or from I don't know, social sciences and so on. We have several people in our HR which are having lots of preparation in this human interaction and organizational awareness and development and so on, who help us to actually find the best way to communicate on or to organize things, taking into account humans, not necessarily the technology in this case. So yes, we can say that we go to, for example, in the social sciences to bring some valuable information to the tech world here.
Maybe just to give an example that comes to mind for GoPro would be maybe collaborating and working with a linguistic expert, because our products use voice recognition. For us, it's important to make sure that the cameras interact as naturally as possible with our customers. So there would be I guess, a domain that's non-technical, but would definitely bring a lot of value.
Yeah, that's a very good example. Yeah, indeed. Indeed. So coming back to, let's say, mapping the new technologies onto what you already have in your application array, would you rather say you replace what exists, you adjust what exists, or you integrate with what exists?
I can give some insight on how we do it actually. Actually, we use everything, all the options, replace, we tick, adjust, or integrate, and so on. In a complex technology landscape where you are usually having several systems, we don't take a decision where we change everything. Never, we never took this approach up to now. And usually you go to subsystems or several platforms and you say, what do I want to achieve there? And usually, as I told before, we are very strongly linked with the business needs, what we need to do next, what we want to do with that platform, and so on. And we assess something like very clearly, for example, will this current technology that we are using in that product will continue to solve my business needs or features that I have to implement, let's say in the next few years, 2-3 years and so on, maybe more. If it's other systems may become obsolete due to, I don't know, technology, due to support or anything like this. And we always ask here, for example, if it's the moment to actually replace everything or to change it and so on. So usually we go in the place of slowly replacing, and we take the approach where we replace modules generally and put side by side the old technology with the new technology, and we are slowly moving to that new technology. We don't stop and say, okay, we need to do big rewrite or do something like this in order to be compliant with the new technology just because of this.
Actually, this would have been leading a little bit into my next question, that because so many companies want to preserve the investments they've previously made, we have the whole array of low-code and no-code platforms, which basically help people integrate existing existing systems with each other without a deep know-how of development, and which would bring, let's say, non-developers into the software engineering process. And I wanted to ask you how you are looking at that going forward, and whether there are any risks you foresee into, let's say, having people from with other expertise backgrounds stepping in the software development process.
I think it's an opportunity, Mihai. Usually, because I think these profiles are also very business oriented, so they would bring directly their expertise to the table. I think now, and probably at least for the foreseeable future, these will run in parallel also with, let's say, complex coding platforms, or let's say traditional coding languages. There are different, I think, use cases for both, also depending on the requirements, starting from usage to, of course, business requirements. I see them, yeah, both. And of course, it's also an opportunity for the people and for the developers that have been doing maybe traditional coding to look into this as time progresses. So yeah, I see it as an opportunity myself.
This could be an opportunity indeed, but you need to be aware that it has some risks involved as well, because it kind of reduces the complexity of the tasks you can do or the customization you can do afterwards. So it depends on the organization running the product development. For us, it's a matter of return on investment. Whenever we select a new technology, we need to look into how difficult it would be to implement a new technology, how expensive, how long it would take versus the benefits it would bring. Benefits plus additional risks or limitations. Because, for instance, platforms that would allow non-developers to create functionality are useful if you're trying to bring something frequently, new stuff frequently to life. But then again, there are limitations you need to understand or take into account, because you won't be able to do whatever you want.
Indeed. So the choices, I think, has to be done with yeah, with an open mind, but very cautiously, because one of the risks that I also saw is that a lot of these low-code platforms also offer the possibility to do some actual coding. So if at some point what they offer from a component perspective is not enough, you can also do some coding. But yeah, if the choice is not right, you might find yourself in the situation that you do a lot of coding, but then you have the restrictions of the platform. So you might be doing yeah, a better job if you would start with a traditional, let's say, programming language. So yeah, as everything, you need to be cautious and do it in a smart way, and yeah, analyze very well what needs to be built now, what should be built in the future, okay, as much as you can, and base your decision on that, and not necessarily go directly, because maybe the first things that you need to build look, yeah, cheaper using X
And
or
easy
Y.
to do.
Yeah.
And you also need to look into the risk of becoming captive on a platform, because if you build an entire set of use cases and potentially a part of the organization on that platform, and you no longer afterwards have the flexibility to further grow your business, it's going to be a very expensive decision and implementation to change that platform. So it's an opportunity, but it's a sword with a double blade.
We actually passed through at least two, as I remember, two cases of let's say empowering, mostly tech-savvy business users, let's say, because we did not go to actually give them everything. One was in the domain of BI reporting, for example. We have here platforms which allow the power user, let's say, to actually do that kind of integration with different data sources, data lakes, and so on. And rather than letting the IT do the reports and just publishing them to the business users, we had the feedback that they always want a new field, a new kind of customization that they want, and we went to the situation where we, for example, publish them kind of data lakes or universes where with data that they can query as they want, for example. And we found out that this was a successful actually experiment, because they were willing to write also code for this. For example, how to scripting or how to bind all kinds of reports and so on, or process them automatically. But I can also give you a less successful example where we find it like a let's say not optimal approach here. For example, I was mentioning the robot process automation. And usually when you're looking at the RPA framework from the developer perspective, you are looking, oh, what's this? I don't know how to say it politely. Shit. Here. So how am I supposed to integrate via UI or some kind of other means with the RPA? And we found out that giving for example, this access to the business users to this kind of tools, actually they actually did some kind of integrations between apps, which were easily could be done by IT speaking with that system via, I don't know, web services and so on. And in this case, I think this is not the right approach in all the cases, and linking applications or platforms at the UI level. And this is a technology choice that is very fragile on the long term, and somehow limits your possibility of changing things as they want. And this is a way where I don't think this kind of integrations are good to be let at the mercy of power users from the business, because they create coupling on the long term, and this is very hard to break afterwards.
Okay, thank you so much. Now we have some questions from our kind audience, and Cliff is asking, are you using system on a chip or embedded systems development? And do you find that development demands on these platforms are standards higher than PC architecture information processing type environments?
For me, it's easy. We don't.
Okay.
Sorry, I couldn't hear the last part of the question, Mihai. Can you
So the
please repeat
question
it?
was that, I mean, whether you use embedded software development or system on a chip, and if you find the standards of developing for embedded as being higher than those of traditional PC architecture.
We do use embedded development, of course. The standards are higher because the stakes are higher. There is a lot less room for mistake, and the languages themselves are a lot more unforgiving. So I think the limitations of the standards are natural, given what you're trying to do in an embedded ecosystem. You can easily play with memory, and you can easily mess it up. So it's important to know exactly what you're doing. It's programming in C embedded is not as forgiving as Java. Mm-hmm. There is no garbage collector. You really need to know what you're doing. So I don't think the standards are an issue there. I think they're important.
Yep. And Cliff has one more question for you, Radu.
Yep.
Was the reason for dropping drone production due to the technical challenges, or due to commercial competition issues, as in they were not profitable enough? What were the unique demands of drone technologies?
I don't think it was a matter of technical issues. I think it was a matter of how we drove the business decision. I think it's something I would not venture into answering necessarily. I wasn't part of the company back then, so I don't know exactly the background.
Okay, thank you very much. Vasilika asks us, how much time do you allocate to your teams to learn or explore new technologies until you take a go, no go adoption decision?
I can answer you to this, how we proceed actually. Is not a fixed time here. Is no, we are not talking like recipes, like pharmaceutical recipes and so on, medicine. We usually go to, we have two approaches here, depending on how we want to do it. If the technology is something like which is with big impact, usually it has a, let's say, a high blast radius. We usually dedicate a lot of time. We do POC for weeks, maybe several months for this. We dedicate people and so on. I can give you here an example. For example, adopting the a Kubernetes management platform, which is something like a lot of impact here in Orange if it when adopting it due to operational issues and so on. And here we have followed with a dedicated team. And we did a POC. A POC is actually several months old. We are doing something like chose selection process. We are doing architecture and so on, all this stuff, and it takes a while, because after we took this, it's a jump where other teams need to go, because it's very hard to just to do all this only for the need of a certain team. But with smaller, let's say, technology stacks, like for example, trying out a new language. We want to try Go, for example, Golang, and so on. We find out that for us works a little bit different. For example, we try to find projects which are either temporarily used in production. For example, we do a lot of offers, online offers and so on in this area, and these are usually backed up by systems which can be developed in a few weeks or months. It can be done with the new language. It will stay into production for, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 months, and afterwards it will fade out. In this case, we jump straight away. We just go prototype and do all this stuff, and in the new language, doesn't matter for us if it's the cleanest code and so on, and usually because it's a tryout period. And with these two approaches, this is the way that we found out that it works.
We don't have a standard duration as well in GoPro of time that we allow our team members to learn new technology. It also depends on how that new technology came up. If it's part of the career development plan, it's something that our engineers want to learn and grow upon, then we definitely reserve a part of their time to look into the new technology, and we give them this opportunity. But it's important that it's something, or it's technology that is relevant to what we're doing, that is connected to the product we're trying to build. At the same time, if it's an idea, as we mentioned earlier, for a new functionality to be implemented using a new tech, then we definitely define a POC and we time box it and try to do something in a certain amount of time to get an outcome of it, something that can be evaluated. So it could be from allocating, I don't know, 10% of somebody's time to working on new tech to full time for a short period of time in a POC.
Right. Okay, now we have a question from Alexandru Unza. I'm not sure if this was not actually covered from your previous responses, but I'll read it. He asks us, what do you consider an appropriate metric for judging if a technology is a good fit or not?
I think it's a metrics. It's not a metric that we need to look into. It's going to be a set of criteria that we have to take into account. For GoPro, at least, the maturity of a technology is important because, as I mentioned earlier, we need to take into account the entire product lifecycle. then we need to look into the flexibility it brings us, what it allows us to do. There are many criteria, but I think the maturity is one of the most important ones, and security is again an important constraint.
Indeed,
But
I
it's a
think in
set of
the yeah. Sorry, Rado.
No, go ahead. I just wanted to mention that it's a set of criteria that we're looking at.
Indeed, that's so I agree with the statement that especially in the enterprise world, I think maturity is a key factor in making a decision. Usually, you don't see a high level of adoptions regarding technologies that have been out for, I don't know, a couple of months or maybe even a year. You want to have a time where that technology matures, where the all the things that need to be ironed out are fixed, and then you can start using it, because you don't want, besides the things that you need to implement in your product, you don't want to go into the actual framework and start fiddling there, and in the end have an unstable product. That's really really no go. So I think maturity is very important. I see also security part of the maturity and scalability and all those things. Yeah.
What we usually do here is adopting a more like a evaluation grill or metrics of features and so on, and several people are invited to actually score their choices there. We try to find the best criteria, like for example, even apart from, I don't know, security, scalability, we also look into community, for example, because we are usually adopting open source technology as a first choice rather than going to the commercial in other cases, and we are looking a lot of the how mature is, how vivid are the discussions on the groups and so on, which are the tools that we can use to troubleshoot that technology. For example, one of the we are also looking if we need at some point commercial support from, I don't know, a company which can provide us commercial support, but is not necessarily taken into account from the start. We are also looking at how we train, if we can find talent on the market to operate that technology or to work with that technology as well. And this is very important, because you cannot adopt a new technology without the right people and without giving them time to actually learn it, to get familiar and so on. And apart from the technical evaluation, like it supports all these kind of tick boxes that the developers usually look, we also look at this kind of criteria in order to be comfortable when we adopt it.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much. Now we're getting close to our time limit. We have one more question, which comes also from Alexandru Unza. Actually, it was on my original list as well, but I'll read his. It was in a slightly different wording. But Alexandru is asking, can you give us an example when you chose a technology and that turned out to be a bad decision?
Bad decision.
I can think of several proof of concepts that didn't go beyond proof of concepts in Cegeka.
I can also think about proof of concepts, but unfortunately or fortunately, the answer is no. I can't think of something that made it to production, which was a bad decision in terms of a tech stack. We definitely tried a lot of things, but they didn't make it to production.
Maybe not necessarily the bad decision, but more like we often we find out that after a while that is not fit for us, or does not solve all this stuff. We were in the position where we built software, and after 1 year and so on of production and so on, we found out that it will kind of limit us at that moment, or I don't know, we don't want to go, for example, we want to go in the front-end development with I don't know, single page application frameworks rather than server side and so on. And we invested some time and resources to, for example, to build this kind of server side rendering technology for our use cases here. And at some point we found out that it became too complex to actually develop something over the top. And at some point we say, okay, is it worth continuing to invest into that area, or should we stop and say, okay, let's go and find something alternative which allows us to move faster? And this happens, but not very often, actually. And it's not something that I can say, okay, this is the case.
Andrei, anything comes to mind?
I think from a service company perspective, sometimes you also need to take some leaps of faith, I think they are called, and to invest in training some teams or resources in a specific technology, expecting that it will come to fruition, or it will have a big impact also from a commercial perspective. So related to the actual question, I don't think there were some, I don't know, decisions or bad decisions that we regretted in a product. What did happen indeed was that maybe some areas didn't, grow as fast or strong as we thought. Maybe RPA would be an example. Maybe the artificial intelligence, which are still, I think, hot topics. But maybe they didn't, had the traction that we expected in the first place. Does that mean that the decision was bad? Yeah, maybe we reconvene in a year or two and check then. But for now, I think it's an investment. And as I said, I think these are hot topics that we still expect to grow.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think we're just on time. So Robert, Andrei, and Radu, thank you so much for your participation and very interesting input. Also, everyone in the audience who, let's say, bared with us for this hour. Hope to see you again at our next webinar. And yeah, until then, thank you.
Thank you, Mihai, for having us, and thank you for all the participants. If there's any feedback or other questions, I think it's we are all open to pick them up as a follow-up. So thanks again.
Gladly.
That's for sure. Thank you.
Okay.
I had a great time.
Now. You too.
Bye.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.